My name is Margaret Ellison, 63 years old. I've spent most of my life behind the reference desk of a small library in Eugene, Oregon. Quiet days, soft voices, everything in its right place. I liked order, predictability, but that morning in Utah, under the red cliffs and the blazing sun, nothing about my life made sense anymore. We had been on the road for 2 days, my son Evan, his wife Tessa, and me. Evan had offered to drive me out to see Bryce Canyon. "You should get out more, Mom," he'd said. It sounded like kindness, but I heard the impatience underneath, the way he always spoke when he was doing something out of obligation. We stopped at a lonely gas station somewhere along Highway 89. The air shimmered with heat. Tessa was scrolling on her phone, her sunglasses reflecting everything but emotion. I told them I'd be just a minute and stepped inside to buy water and use the restroom. The place smelled of dust and old coffee. When I came back out, the pump beside me was still clicking, but their car wasn't where they'd parked it. They were gone. At first, I thought they'd pulled around to the shade. I shaded my eyes and looked up and down the highway. Nothing but open road and heat waves. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. The clerk, a young man with acne scars, poked his head out. "Everything okay?" "Ma'am, I think so," I said, though my throat felt dry. "They'll be back." He nodded and went inside again. Another 10 minutes passed. The air conditioner on the store's roof groaned like it might give up. A bead of sweat slid down my neck. Then my phone buzzed a text from Evan. "We'll see if you can find your way back. Don't worry, just a joke." For a moment, I couldn't move. I stared at the screen, the little smiling face at the end of the sentence, and felt something heavy drop inside my chest. My wallet was in the glove compartment. My phone battery was at 15%. They had the car and my wallet. My phone battery was at 15%. I called once. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again, and this time the call didn't even connect. The young clerk came out again, holding a bottle of water. "You sure you don't need to use the phone?" "Ma'am, I took it," thanked him, and sat on the curb beside the vending machine. The asphalt burned through my jeans. Somewhere, a crow screamed over the canyon wind. I imagined them laughing together in the car, Tessa probably filming my reaction. Evan telling her to stop, then laughing too. They'd always thought my seriousness was funny. After half an hour, the sound of an engine broke the silence. Not them. A long-haul truck slowed, air brakes hissing, the cab shimmering silver in the heat. The driver leaned out, squinting down at me. "You okay, lady?" I looked at the road stretching north, the endless desert horizon, and stood. "I think so," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, almost calm. He nodded toward the passenger door. "Hop in. I'm headed to Cedar City." I hesitated only a second before climbing up, as the truck rumbled forward. I looked once more in the mirror. The gas station shrank behind us until it disappeared in the dust. I didn't know what waited ahead, but I knew one thing: I wasn't turning back. The truck's cab smelled faintly of coffee, oil, and the faint sweetness of tobacco. The driver introduced himself as Royce, a name that suited his slow, steady voice. He looked to be in his late 50s, the kind of man whose face had been shaped by wind and road dust more than time itself. We drove in silence for the first few miles. The desert rolled out endlessly on both sides, red rock melting into pale sky. The hum of the tires was steady, almost hypnotic. I pressed my hands together in my lap to keep them from trembling. "Heading somewhere in particular?" he asked after a while, eyes still on the road. "North," I said. "Just north for now." He nodded. Like that was answer enough. "Got family to call, I can lend you my phone." For a long moment, I stared at the device resting in the cup holder. My son's number was right there in memory. I could imagine what I'd say, my voice too calm, his laughter awkward. the apology that wouldn't mean anything. I shook my head. No, thank you. Royce didn't press. Suit yourself, he said, turning up the radio just enough to fill the air. A country song about highways and home drifted through the static. We stopped once at a rest area outside of Panguitch. He bought 2 coffees from a vending machine and handed me one without a word. The paper cup was hot against my palms. Grounding, somehow. You got folks waiting for you up there, he asked quietly. Not really, I said. Just a place I used to know somewhere I could find shelter for now. He nodded again, that same understanding in his eyes. Sometimes that's enough. The sun was dropping behind the cliffs when Cedar City appeared in the distance, a scattering of lights against the darkening plain. Royce slowed as we approached. They've got a women's shelter near Main Street. I've dropped a few travelers there before. Good people. Tell him Royce sent you. I thanked him, meaning it more than he could know. When I climbed down from the truck, the night air hit cool against my face. I stood on the curb and watched his taillights fade into the horizon, the road stretching ahead like an unfinished sentence. The shelter was a low brick building tucked behind a grocery store. Its front porch lined with potted succulents and a small sign that read Haven House. Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap and old coffee. A woman at the front desk looked up as I entered, her hair silver and pulled into a braid. Evening, she said. Need a bed? Yes, I managed. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She slid a clipboard toward me. Fill this out. First name, last name, where you're coming from. Anything you've got for ID. I stared at the form for a long time. Where you're coming from, I didn't know how to answer. I finally wrote Utah, traveling from Eugene, Oregon, in small letters that trembled slightly. For identification, I added a note lost wallet. When I handed it back, she gave a small, understanding nod. We see that a lot, she said. I'm Ruth. Ruth showed me to a narrow bed in a room with 4 others, separated by thin curtains. The hum of a box fan filled the silence. Someone coughed softly from behind a divider. Breakfast is at 7, she said. There's a computer in the office if you need to fill out ID replacement forms. Take your time. That night, I lay on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling tiles. Every muscle ached from tension and sun. My phone battery had died hours ago, and the quiet pressed in heavy and strange. In the morning, I sat at the computer and began filling out the online forms. Name, date of birth, last known address. One by one, I typed pieces of myself back into the system. When I reached the final line signature, my hands steadied. For the first time since that gas station, I didn't feel invisible. By the end of the week, I had my temporary ID and a list of job openings taped to the shelter wall. Most were short shifts, housekeeping, janitorial, dishwashing. None of it bothered me. After years of helping library patrons find what they needed, I knew how to start small. The diner was on the edge of town, a squat building with a flickering neon sign that read, Jack's Place. The morning I walked in, the smell of frying onions and coffee hit me like a wall. A woman stood behind the counter, tall and wiry, her gray hair tied in a red bandana. You're the one Ruth sent, she asked without looking up from the register. Yes. Ma'am, Margaret Ellison. Call me Jacqueline. She gave me a once-over that felt like an X-ray. Ever washed dishes before? Not professionally. Her mouth twitched. You'll learn. Aprons are in the back if you're late. Don't bother showing up. That was her entire orientation. But when she handed me the apron, it felt heavier than cloth. It was something like trust. The kitchen was a blur of heat and clatter. I found rhythm in the noise plates stacking, water rushing, the scrape of metal spoons against porcelain. The first few hours blistered my hands, but I didn't complain. The cooks were kind in a rough way, shouting instructions that sounded like insults but weren't. By lunchtime, the sink was full again, a mountain of greasy pans. I rolled up my sleeves higher, sweat running down my neck. Jacqueline passed by once, set a glass of water next to me, and said, "You're slow, but you don't quit. Keep it up." Those words carried me through the afternoon. When the last plate was shelved and the floor mopped, I stepped outside into the cool air behind the diner. My arms ached. My back throbbed. But I felt something I hadn't in weeks useful. Jacqueline came out with a cigarette dangling from her fingers. "You live at the shelter. For now," she nodded. "They'll let you stay 2 more weeks. After that, you'll need rent money. I'll keep you on if you want the hours." "I do," I said. She exhaled smoke toward the gravel lot. "Then be here tomorrow at 6. And bring gloves." When she went back inside, I stood for a long moment in the pale light of evening. My hands stung. My clothes smelled of soap and grease. But under all that, something quiet stirred like pride rediscovering its voice. Chapter 5. The Calls and the Silence. By late autumn, the routines had settled into something almost steady. I worked 5 days a week at Jack's place, slept at the shelter, and saved every dollar I could. When the manager at the thrift store across the street showed me a small prepaid phone for $35, I bought it. Not for calls, just to feel connected to something again. I didn't give the number to anyone except Ruth, in case of emergencies. But 2 weeks later, a message appeared from an unknown number, then another. I opened the first one before I could stop myself. It was Evan's voice, thin, uncertain. "Mom, hey, this got out of hand. Tessa says it was supposed to be a joke. We were going to turn around, but then I don't know. Call me, okay?" The second message came a day later. Tessa's tone was sharper, almost irritated. "We thought you'd come back by now. You can't just disappear like this. Margaret, people are asking questions." People. She meant neighbors, friends, the ones who believed everything she said. I replayed the messages twice, listening for guilt, for something real. But all I heard was discomfort, the kind that comes when a cruel joke lands harder than expected. They called again that night. I let it ring. The phone's vibration on the nightstand sounded like a trapped insect. The next morning, Jacqueline noticed I was quieter than usual. "Someone giving you trouble?" she asked, wiping down the counter. I shrugged. "Just ghosts." She didn't pry. "Ignore 'em." She said simply, "They only exist if you feed them." That evening, I sat on the cot at the shelter, the phone heavy in my hand. I scrolled to their numbers, pressed block, and watched their names vanish from the screen. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean, like the air after rain. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without dreaming of the road behind me. 3 years slipped by before I noticed how far I'd come. The road that once terrified me had somehow carried me home, just not to the home I'd expected. After leaving Cedar City, I followed seasonal jobs north, cleaning motels, sorting produce, shelving books at a college library. By the time I reached Bend, Oregon, I had enough saved for a studio apartment above a bakery. The window overlooked the Deschutes River, and at night, the water sounded like breath steady, forgiving. The bookshop was on Main Street, a narrow place that smelled of paper and cinnamon from the cafe next door. When the owner retired, she asked if I'd take over the day-to-day running. I said yes before fear could answer for me. The work came easily, stacking shelves, chatting with customers, writing small notes for the display table, for quiet mornings, or for hearts that need soft things. Sometimes I caught myself smiling as I worked. My neighbor, Lydia, lived across the hall, a widow in her 70s with a garden of potted herbs crowding the balcony. She knocked one afternoon, holding a plate of blueberry muffins. "I made too many," she said, though she always did, over tea. She told me about her son in Portland, her late husband who used to carve birdhouses. I told her about my library years, leaving out the rest. She didn't ask. She only said, "You seem like a woman who's learned how to start over." We began meeting once a week, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit on the balcony and watch the light fade over Pilot Butte. She talked more than I did, but I liked that. Her voice filled the empty places I hadn't realized were still hollow. The seasons turned again. The bookstore grew busier, and I stopped glancing at the door, expecting someone I knew to walk in. My hands no longer shook when I signed my name on pay slips or rental forms. I bought a second-hand lamp for the reading corner and a rug with faint blue threads that reminded me of the Oregon coast. One evening in late spring, I caught my reflection in the shop's front glass hair streaked with silver. Posture straight, eyes calm, for a long time. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Then I did. It was a quiet Sunday morning at the shop, the kind of morning when the world feels half asleep. Lydia had left a basket of lavender by my door, and I was sorting through invoices when the computer chimed a new message. The sender's name froze me. Evan Ellison. For a moment, I just stared at it, the cursor blinking beside his name like a heartbeat. Then I opened it. Mom. It began. I don't even know where to start. Things have been rough. I lost my job 2 months ago, and Tessa's business isn't doing well. We've been talking a lot about the past, about what happened. I was stupid. We both were. I thought it was funny, but I see now how wrong that was. We miss you. Maybe we could talk. You've always been good with money. Maybe you could help us figure things out like you always have, even when we didn't deserve it. Love, Evan. The words felt heavy, like stones being set one by one on my chest. The tone was the same as always, half remorse, half request. There was no mention of that day at the gas station, no acknowledgement of what it took to survive afterward. Just the easy shift from guilt to need. I read it twice, once as a mother, once as a woman who had finally learned not to mistake manipulation for affection. Then I moved the cursor to the corner of the screen and pressed delete, outside. The streetlights were flickering on. I closed the laptop, turned the shop's sign to closed, and watched people walking their dogs along the river trail. The world carried on, unconcerned, and for the first time, I felt grateful to be part of its quiet rhythm. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that begins without warning of change. The bell above the door jingled, and when I looked up from the counter, my hands went still. Evan stood there, older, heavier, his shoulders slightly slumped. Beside him, Tessa clutched her handbag like a lifeline. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The air in the shop shifted quiet, but electric. "Mom," he said softly, as if the word might break. "You look good." I wiped my hands on a cloth and forced my voice steady. "What brings you here?" Tessa stepped forward first. "We came to see you. Things have been complicated. We thought maybe it was time to talk." Her tone carried the careful politeness of someone who still believed they held the advantage. I gestured toward the small table near the window. "You can sit." They didn't buy books or look around. They talked about their struggles, the job loss, the mortgage, the sense that nothing feels right anymore. Evan said they'd been haunted by guilt. Then came the real reason. "We just need a little help getting back on our feet," he said, eyes darting to mine. On the blank line, I wrote a symbolic amount, just enough to cover the cost of coming back safely, a gesture of what was owed. I tore the check, laid it on the table, and slid it toward them. Evan frowned. "What's this?" "The cost of coming back," I said. "It's all that was ever owed." Tessa's lips parted, but no sound came. Evan's face tightened, pride and confusion twisting together. Neither reached for the paper. Pride and shame wrestling in their expressions, I turned the shop's sign to closed. "You should go now," I said quietly. They did. The bell rang again as the door shut behind them, and the sound felt final, like a chapter closing in perfect silence. That evening, The first snow of the season began to fall slow, deliberate flakes drifting past the window of my small apartment. The air outside glowed pale against the streetlights, softening everything it touched. Lydia stopped by with a thermos of tea, her cheeks red from the cold. We sat for a while in easy silence, watching the world turn white. When she finally left, she squeezed my hand gently, as if she already knew there were no words needed. After she was gone, I stood by the porch door, the same porch light she'd kept on for herself, now glowing steady against the snow with an old brass lock and a small outdoor light. For years, that light had been a signal left on for someone running late, for the son who used to promise he'd call, but now the porch was quiet, the house warm, and no one was expected. I stepped outside, snow whispering beneath my shoes. The cold nipped at my skin, but it felt cleansing, not cruel. I flipped the switch. The bulb flickered once, then glowed steady, a warm circle cutting through the white. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I whispered. "It's for peace." I stayed there a moment longer, breathing in the stillness, before closing the door gently behind me.